Today's episode of Camp Code is the second in a four-part series all about capturing what it means and how to cope with being a camp director at the end of summer 2020 and looking forward to summer 2021 and the future during the global pandemic caused by COVID-19. Episode 73 of the Camp Code podcast dives into the best practices for taking care of you. Yes, you, the listener of this podcast, before you get deep in the trenches of taking care of your camp community and your loved ones. We know that camp people are givers and will consistently put the needs of others before their own. To be the most effective giver, though, you cannot give from an empty cup. Pour yourself a warm beverage of choice and listen in to today's episode of Camp Code.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We've created and are dedicated to this podcast because we believe that staff training is one of, if not the most important part of your job as a camp director. Staff training is what prepares your staff to care for their kids, to feel confident in their skills, to do their jobs to the best of their ability, and to learn along the way. A well thought out and intentional staff training will help you in more ways than you can imagine. And we need to help each other bring our very best. So let's begin episode 2 of this season by sharing with you who you're listening to. Ruby.
My name is Ruby Compton. I am the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors, which is a fancy way of saying I'm self-employed. I work as a friend to camp, and I'm in Western North Carolina, just south of Asheville.
Thanks, Ruby. And Gab.
And my name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains of Quebec, Canada, and we focus on creating a positive female community.
Thanks, Gab. And she does it in 2 different languages, by the way.
Oui.
And I'm Beth Allison, co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. I was a director for 15 years, but now I am a camp consultant with my husband, Travis. And my big passion is intentional leadership training and helping camps build solid and really supportive communities. And as promised last week, our topic today is taking care of you during COVID-19. So let's dive in. Ruby, how do you recommend folks take care of themselves during this time?
So I can't say strongly enough it's okay to not be okay, and to let that sink in, that it's okay to not be okay right now. And it's okay to be okay as well. And that's what's so challenging and interesting about this time, is that we are on all ends of the spectrum, and one person individually may experience all ends of those spectrums, and your neighbors may be experiencing something very different from you. I know there are folks that have talked about experiencing survivor guilt for they got to keep their jobs while other folks in the organization may have been laid off. And recognizing that we have been navigating through something that is very challenging, that these are unprecedented times. You know, the meme about, man, I'd really like to see precedented times again. And that this is the other piece that I just want people to hear and sit with for a bit, which is your grief and your pain is not comparative. So how you are feeling is what you are experiencing, and let go of any guilt or shame or comparative feelings that you are having, because your feelings are, you know, oh, I have it bad, but not as bad as those people, or I have it way worse than so-and-so. Just let go of that. Let go of that judgment. And as much as possible, recognize those feelings, be in those feelings, be grateful for what you have and what is going well. And don't feel guilty for the things that are going well or the things that are going terribly. And I've been reading White Fragility with a group of other camp pros, and we've been talking about that. And that is a topic that came up, is this comparativeness, where it's like, yeah, my life is tough, but like theirs is way worse. So then I feel guilt about ever feeling bad because that person's life is way worse. And there may be truth to that. And we have to let go of some of that shame, because when we get so caught up in the shame and the guilt, we don't actually process the real feelings that we're having. So it's okay to not be okay right now, and your grief and your pain is not comparative. And if you can start there, I think that will help you as you build on some of these other tips we have today.
Thanks, Ruby. Wise words. Gab, what do you have to start us off with today?
For me, it's about trying to tap into what you need as well as what you want. And I think during these times, what we want is really, really difficult, let alone as well as our needs. And I would try to break it up in looking at it in small pieces. What do you need from your morning? What do you want from your morning? What do you need from your day? What would you like from your day, week, month, year? And to remember that joy and pleasure is a very important part of that equation. So for example, for myself, before the summer happened, during the springtime, I was working approximately anywhere between easily 9 to about 12 or 13 hours a day, and I was on Zoom. I tried to adjust if I had meetings where it was one-on-one to go for walks and talk on my phone. But then because I live in Montreal, I would see a lot of people on the street. I would see some people without masks on. That really stressed me out. Then I started walking in the middle of the street, and then I'd have to avoid cars, and my anxiety and stress just kept going higher and higher and higher. And I realized that though I needed to do what I needed to do, what ended up happening is I just stayed in my apartment because that's where my stress was the least amount. And one day, just because of my phone calls, I'd walked something like 11,000 steps in my own apartment, just back and forth pacing. So this fall, I've decided, and I'm very privileged to be living up at camp. I have a cabin that's 4 seasons. I'm staying here. And the way my day is working is from 8:30 to 12:30, I'm doing meetings, I'm doing some computer work, some brain thinking, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm having a nice lunch. I'll have a nice nap. And then in the afternoon, I'm going to be doing camp manual labor, painting a building, moving rocks from point A to point B, et cetera, et cetera. I need to be outside. I need to be physically working, and I need to declutter what's in my brain. And I think the afternoon piece is going to be very, very helpful. This is what I need. This is what I want. But this is something that I'm able to do because I'm trying to be realistic with the tasks that I'm going to try to accomplish. And so having that conversation with yourself about what you need as well as what you want, which is equally as important, I feel is a vital importance in moving forward. And again, I know I'm privileged in the position where I am at, but even the smallest of things can make a big, big difference.
Thanks, Gab. I've been doing a lot of reading these days, trying to figure out what exactly it is that I'm feeling. And it's a lot. It's a lot of feelings. We've got new lockdown conditions in some communities, or threats of a second wave looming, and the honeymoon of baking bread or having Zoom cocktail parties or games nights seems to have ended. And I am running out of shows to watch on Netflix. And the news seems to be worse every day, and I compulsively scroll through it or listen to it. I was reading an article by Jonathan Zecker that talked about this ancient Greek emotion called acedia. And early Christian monks in the 5th century were said to have been affected by acedia, and it rose directly out of the spatial and social constrictions that a solitary monastic life necessitated. And these conditions generated a strange combination of listlessness, undirected anxiety, and the inability to concentrate. Sound familiar? So the term was used a lot many centuries ago, but it somehow has been lost in translation. And Jonathan Zecker thinks that we should bring it back, and I am in full agreement. I mean, it talks about emotions brought on by enforced isolation, lack of physical contact and touch, constant uncertainty, and the barrage of bad news, and naming it differentiates it from those clinical terms like depression or anxiety. And some of us have been clinically diagnosed with those, but for the rest of us, it may be something different. Acedia also validates what so many of us are feeling, those of us who, as I said, aren't clinically depressed or suffering from anxiety. And when we can name a feeling, we can share it. We can validate our feelings. So I'm going to use it. But how can dealing with these feelings of acedia and other struggles 2020 has presented us with be beneficial. So I think for me, it's all about being kinder to myself. I have always been a perfectionist, and this pandemic has caused me to really struggle with that. So I keep shoulding on myself, as Gabrielle likes to say, and she even made stickers, and I have a sticker on my water bottle that says that. I have more time at home, so I should be reading more for education and self-improvement. I should be more creative. I should be Marie Kondoing my house, a project Travis and I started back in April and haven't finished. I should be scanning all the old family photos that we have, and we have 3 generations of them times 2. Yet another project that we started months ago and we haven't finished or gone back to. And I'm struggling with using all of this time effectively and productively, and this strange combination of listlessness, undirected anxiety, and the inability to concentrate. So my first tip is be kind to yourself and remind yourself that we are going through unprecedented times, that none of us has lived through a pandemic before. And there are so many other issues that we're dealing with on top of this: natural disasters, political protests, huge financial economic worries. And we need to not only reach out and take care of each other, but also cut ourselves a lot of slack. So be kind to yourself. Ruby, what else have you got?
Well, I'm going to start this point with telling you about this rash on my arm. You're watching the video. It looks a lot better this here. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
So I got this rash on my arm. I noticed it the other day, and it's right around where I wear my watch. So I took my watch off and like cleaned it because I thought maybe something got under there, and that's what gave me this rash. And had the last like 2 to 3 days, I have not worn my watch. And I am a person who has a lot of comfort in having a watch on and knowing what time it is. And I don't like to be the one who uses my phone as my watch. It kind of drives me crazy. But there is something really wonderful about even simply taking off a watch and kind of forgetting about time. And so I want to encourage you to give yourself a weekend, a day off, maybe even just an evening, where remember what it was like to not even like really care about the passage of time, like when you were a kid and you would just go and play in the yard for hours and you'd come in when the sun went down. These are feelings that, you know, we try to elicit at camp for our kids, but I think we don't give ourselves permission to do very often. So consider what that's like. Consider what it's like to just be creative and let your creative brain grow, to just go on a walk and not worry so much about, I need to be back by this time for this call or this thing, but just to go wherever your body radar takes you and wherever you need to be. And I would just really encourage you to find a little space and time to forget about time and see how that goes for you.
I love that, Ruby, and I hope your rash clears up soon.
It's gotten a lot better. I think
Okay,
it was a little poison ivy.
Gotcha.
Oh, no.
Okay, Gab, what's your next tip besides not getting poison ivy?
I know. Well, actually, it links to not poison ivy, but it links to just going for a walk. I really feel for myself, there's a lot of studies that yes, moving is important, breathing is important, and yes, but also just moving forward is important, is important. And I'm watching a lot of Cesar Millan right now because I did take a week off. And so me and the dog whisperer became best friends. And I just watched one episode after another. And there's so many things that he talks about that I feel really apply to camp. But one of the things that he talks about is the importance for dogs to move forward, because just that act puts their stress behind them, puts their anxiety behind them. And that's the same for us as well. We are pack animals. We feel first before we think. A lot of our feelings is what conducts what we're thinking, and action helps. And I'm not talking about exercise, and I'm again going back to what Beth was saying in the should. It's not about should, but it's just saying, hey, I deserve to go out for a walk. I deserve to put on some music or nothing, and just go and walk for 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes out of your day, and just see where your mind takes you. And hopefully what that does is it's the act of moving forward can give you a little bit of space, a little bit of peace of mind.
Thanks, Gab. Along the lines of self-kindness, how about cutting out a few things along with those expectations of perfection? But things like deleting an app that gives you a lot of stress or muting a group chat, especially if there is just too much negativity there for you, or saying no to one more commitment, or cutting down the to-do list, or limiting your consumption of the news. And this has seriously worked for me. I'm not ignoring it and I'm not sticking my head in the sand, but I'm not watching press conferences daily anymore or tuning in to the news every time I walk into the kitchen. Instead, I'm choosing music playlists that make me happy, and I'm spending less time in what for me are toxic environments. I am certainly one to go down the rabbit hole and read the comments posted on Facebook and Instagram. I don't ever respond to the negative ones, but it's like a car crash for me, and I just can't turn away. And I get so angry when I read uneducated comments that go against science, or ones where people are just simply rude and thoughtless towards one another, and they say things that they would never say in person. And I've just had to stop doing that for my own sanity. So I think it's helpful to not just think about ways that we can add healthy options to our lives right now to take care of our emotional and physical selves, but ways we can subtract options from our lives to give us less stress and negative feelings. We are going to take a quick break, but when we return, we've got one more round of ways that you can take care of you this fall, followed, of course, by Gab's famous Camp Code recap.
During our season 8 opener, we talked about 5-Minute Fridays, a new professional development video series from Go Camp Pro.
Indeed, but since then we have gotten a lot of questions about how it works.
Totally. So let's dive in. Every week this year, Go Camp Pro will send you an email.
Another email? Seriously?
No, wait. Check this out. Each week, Travis Allison, Beth Allison, that's you, Matt Hansberger, and Ruby Compton, that's me, each record a 5-minute video with their best tips, tricks, and Camp Pro hacks. Every Friday, you get an email with links to the 4 5-minute videos. You choose to tune in to only one that interests you and save the rest for later, or you can set up a professional development routine where you watch all 4 for 20 minutes of awesome professional development each week that will level up your camp director skills.
So everybody on the Go Camp Pro email list gets this?
Not automatically. Look, 5-Minute Fridays is open to all camp professionals, and it's a subscription-based service. Look, we get it. Finances are weird right now, and Go Camp Pro gets that. So you can subscribe at a monthly or an annual rate, and all the rates are under $10 a month.
So what you're saying is if something changes and I need to opt out, I can?
Absolutely. There's no weird cell phone plan cancellation fees here. Purchase month to month or invest in your professional development for the year. Then the videos start arriving in your inbox on Fridays with 20 minutes of the best curated professional development for camp pros. And you get access to the previous 5-Minute Fridays from your subscription year.
Oh, I just got another great idea for a 5-Minute Friday video. Can we just wrap up this podcast so I can get to it?
Yeah, sure thing. Find out exactly what Beth's genius idea was and more about 5-Minute Fridays at gocamp.pro/5-minute-Fridays. That's 5, the number 5, 5-minute-Fridays, and subscribe today.
Excellent. All right, Ruby, we're going to stay on you for one more insightful tip on taking care of you.
A lot of what we've talked about today, especially Beth, that last point you were making, is about boundaries. And I feel like in the last year, I have become a student of boundaries. And that's been my latest thing I'm really nerding out about and trying to do more trainings on. And recognizing that camp people are notoriously bad at boundaries. We're really good with expectations, but not so great at holding boundaries. And I think it's interesting that when it comes to health, we socially accept those a bit more. I do a training activity that involves role playing, going to your director, your boss, or your board, and that you've been diagnosed with some sort of disease where you have to go in for treatments to a hospital that's an hour and a half away 3 times a week, and talking through that conversation and what that would look like. And it's uncomfortable, but people work through it and they're like serious about it and they figure out a plan. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to do this exercise one more time, but this time you're negotiating over, you're going to stop checking your email at 5 p.m. And I've had so much pushback from folks of like, oh, I can't do that. There's no way I could ask for that. It's impossible. It's my life. It's the family thing, you know? And I'm like, but you're willing to talk about your health and something that's been diagnosed, something serious, potentially terminal. But like really, truly, the fact that you're answering emails all the time at all hours of the night could have equally terrible effects on your life. And the fact that you're willing to engage with it because it's health related, but not willing to engage with it when it's like work related and still health related, there's something there that's interesting. And so I encourage you to spend a little time studying boundaries. There's some great podcasts out there. I'll put a link in the show notes to an episode of the Mark Groves podcast, where he brought up the sentiment that boundaries are, we think about them as being the wall, but instead, and building walls, but instead it's showing folks where the door is. And it's your invitation for how people are expected to interact with you, and also how you show people out when they are not interacting with you in the ways that you want to. And I think that boundaries have become a critical skill, a must-have skill in this work from home world, in a world where, and I appreciate this, right? That boundaries are something that we're talking about more casually. I was on a river trip and I hitched a ride from the takeout to the put-in to get my car. And I got in the car with this guy and he said, I had a mask on, and he said, do you want me to put a mask on too? And I so appreciated that we were just from the get-go having this conversation instead of that being weird and this question of like, how do we want to interact with each other? So some of it is being normalized. And I think we need to do more work around that to put that in all aspects of our life, not just health and, sickness and COVID related. It needs to be all around us.
Great. Very wise. Thanks, Ruby. Okay, Gab, your last tip.
My last tip is a lot of what we're talking about right now is how to take care of yourself. And this is by no means to add any pressure onto you, but I'm finding that reaching out to some of my staff members who are in university, or particularly the ones that are just out of university and they can't find a job, and setting up some just chat times with them and holding space for them gives me a sense of purpose and gives me a sense of connection. And it also helps me with, I don't know, I hear them giggle and laugh, and I also get to hear some of the tougher stuff. And just afterwards, I think I'm just doing as much for them as they're doing for me, because in our industry, it's about community. And I think that if you have the energy to just set up a meeting or a check-in point, I find that this is actually very, very helpful. It just helps with connection to others and connection to self. And if you don't have the energy for that, then good. Listen to yourself and go back to what Beth was talking about. Stop shitting on yourself. But for me, it has been quite helpful to say, hey, I'm here, and for those individuals to be able to just share how they are doing. And there's a reason why community can be so powerful. We can be in this together. So if you have the space and the mental and emotional ability to hold those spaces, maybe once or twice a month, for me, that has been very, very lovely and wonderful and has grounded me.
Gabz, can I add on to that I was hosting some Taco Tuesdays that folks who follow me on social media saw. And basically I just set up on my calendar an appointment software that folks could just book a time. And those were such great days. And I had conversations with all range of folks, from folks who live down the street from me who said, I just want to check in and see how you're doing, to people who are like, I get to talk to somebody who's on the Camp Code podcast. It was very cute. So, shout out to my friends who did that. And so, like setting up kind of like an office hours and having that accessibility. The technology's out there to make it really simple and easy. And folks appreciate it, that little connection point, that little conversation. And I always get so many insights out of conversations. So I have to second your recommendation. It's a great idea.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if you don't know, what, set it up as how are you doing, maybe that doesn't draw people in. what I'm doing with my staff is holding space for them to do homework. So, it's just a work period. And so our first 15 minutes is just a free space to chat. And then the next hour is where they're doing homework, and you're just basically doing homework on Zoom. And then at 55 minutes, everybody pops back up and says, oh, this is what I accomplished. This is what I want to continue to accomplish. But it's just sort of a little bit of a network. But that first 15 minutes is so precious, because they're just talking about what it's like to be at school without going to school, and et cetera, et cetera. So if you need sort of a reason, maybe hosting a homework session, or hosting I'm looking for a job session, or those type of things. But you're right. If you can do it, I personally have felt rejuvenated from those experiences.
Thanks, Gab. It's all about the connection. And for many of us, we missed it completely this past summer. So making those opportunities available for your staff, if that's something you feel you can do right now, can benefit them, but also benefit you. So my last tip is all about using chemicals. And I'm not talking about those kinds of chemicals, but I want to talk about the happiness chemicals. There are 4, and I think we could all sit down and make lists of the ways that we can add more of them into our lives that work specifically for us. So having a visual list in front of us with great ideas on it can help us when we're feeling stuck. So let's start with chemical number 1, which is good old oxytocin. And we've all talked to our staff about this feel-good hormone for years, and how to get enough of it during the summer when they no longer have their cell phones 24/7, for example. So what can we do to hack into oxytocin now? And if you do some research into it, it's things like playing with your dog, or holding a baby, or like maybe your 4-month-old grandson, or holding somebody's hand who's in your bubble, of course, or giving a compliment to someone. These all release oxytocin. Endorphins, number 2. So how can you release some of these? Laugh. Laughter is great for this. So maybe set aside some time to watch a really great comedy, or chat with that friend that you know always just makes you laugh. Or, go back in time and watch old Carol Burnett episodes, or even Abbott and Costello's Who's on First, like anything that will make you laugh. Exercise, get out and move, whatever kind you like to do. Eat dark chocolate. Do you not love a tip that tells you to eat chocolate? Dopamine is number 3. That's the reward chemical. So complete a task, but remember not to add too many to your to-do list. But when you complete a task, you release some of that dopamine. When you make a healthy, good, delicious meal for yourself, something that's good for you, do a self-care activity like a home facial, or celebrate the little wins in a day, like rewarding yourself with dark chocolate. And finally, serotonin, which is that mood stabilizer. So meditating, or getting out in nature, having that exposure to sunshine, that good old vitamin D. Make yourself 4 lists under these 4 categories, and choose stuff that brings you joy, and never feel guilty about caring for you. We always tell our staff to make sure, as Ruby said, to fill their own cups so that they can fill others. So make sure you heed your own advice. And no matter the summer you've had, whether running camp or not able to run camp this year, it has been unprecedented, that word again, in its amount of stress. So acknowledge that, put yourself on the list, and take care of you so that you will be able to take care of your people. And now we are ready for our famous Camp Code recap.
Oh, yes, we are. There's a lot of tips that we have, but I think that the number one thing that we have to keep in mind is that there is no easy path forward. And our main goal is not for you to feel guilty or badly about ourselves. That is the main thing. So when we're moving forward in this recap, please keep that in mind. The main goal is that you feel good, because you're doing your best, and we appreciate you. So number 1, your pain is not comparative. Let go of shame. Things are hard out there, and you're allowed to have your feelings, even though other people are having maybe a worse time or an easier time. Feelings are feelings, and they belong to us. what you need / what you want is an important thought process when moving forward into the fall. What you need and what you want are equally as important. Stop shoulding all over yourself and perhaps even on other people. This is very important when we're moving forward, because a lot of expectations, especially for those that are perfectionists, we put those expectations on ourselves, and we want to make sure that shoulding does not exist in our day-to-day. Give yourself time without time. Imagine that. Go for a walk without your watch. That's 2 in 1 right there. Because really, when it comes down to it, you need time for yourself, and you shouldn't be having a tick, 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 tick going on in your head as you're doing that. So let's leave our watch at home while we take a walk. Subtract the things that hurt us. And my goodness, wouldn't that just be better? Not just in pandemic times, but in all times. Things that hurt us are not necessarily helpful. Of course, we have to be informed, but when it's harmful, it's okay to press mute. It's okay to say stop. It's okay to walk away. Boundaries are very helpful, and they're actually quite welcoming. They're about opening doors, not closing the doors, or keeping yourself safe. And while we're at it, let's all wear masks, just saying it. Create space for others, because when you're creating space for others, sometimes you're also creating space for what you want. Don't think about what other people want. Think about what you would like in that space and create that space for them. Our top 4: oxytocins, endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, which sounds like a name to me, like Sarah, and her last name's Tonin. All of those are very, very important, and they're not just a drug list. Those are things that actually exist inside of us, such as saying hi to a dog, holding a baby, laughing, completing a realistic task. All of these things are things that we can do for ourselves to help create a positive and safe space within ourselves. Remember, you are in the plane. You need to put oxygen on your face before you can help other people. Again, this is tough times, but we know we can do it, because you know what? We're here, and we're here to do that together.
Thanks, Gab. Always a brilliant recap. All right. So before we wrap up with our best practice from Ruby this week, here's how folks can connect with us and get involved in the conversation. So join us using that hashtag camp code and let us know any topics you'd like us to discuss, guests you recommend that we talk to, and share any great leadership training tips you have. We would love to hear from you, because we say it all the time. We are all about sharing in this industry. And if you have found this podcast to be useful, please leave a rating and a review for us in iTunes, and maybe we'll read it in the podcast. And you can do that by going to camphacker.tv/cc_iTunes. Or, of course, you can tweet your love of the show by going to camphacker.tv/campcodelove. And your feedback helps us keep the show going. So Ruby is going to share some feedback that we got this week.
This is from KDRO. Kdoro, I don't know. Thank you. We appreciate your review. It says this: Parks and Recreation, small town, New Hampshire. Really enjoying this podcast, and it truly inspires me on my way to work. Being a young Parks and Rec director, I am constantly looking for a source to help with staff training. I have recently started to take a passion for learning how to teach and change the culture of my staff and department. It is refreshing to hear advice from people who are also very passionate. Thank you. Great resources. Doro, you sound like you're our kind of people. Thanks for your review. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ruby. And here's how you can get in touch with each one of us individually. Gab.
You can follow me or DM me on Instagram, Twitter at Gabrielle Rail. Rail takes 2 L's. Or you can check out where I work at ouareau.com, ouareau.com.
All the vowels. And Ruby.
You can email me, Ruby, at rubyoutdoors.com, or you can find me on Instagram at rubyoutdoors, or on Twitter, rubylyn85.
Thank you. And you can email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro, or find me on Instagram as topaz_fae, F-A-E. And Ruby's going to tell us what we're talking about next week.
On our next podcast, our topic is going to be professional development during the 2020 to 2021 off season. We know it's going to look a little different, so let's talk about how to find it this year.
So more about taking care of you. See where we're going with all this? All right. And as always, our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And again, we'd love to hear some of your memorable moments or most effective tips, and you can tell us what they are using the hashtag camp code. And this week's best practice is going to come from Ruby.
I was fortunate enough to get to go do a staff training for a local camp that has been around for a long time, and they have a lot of singing in their camp tradition. And while I was waiting for everyone to gather and for it to be time for me to start, they were, sitting socially distanced and had masks on, but they were singing songs. And it was a moment where tears just came down my face, because I realized this is not happening at a lot of camps across the country. And it was a really beautiful, amazing moment. So my best practice for you today is, whether you like the sound of your voice or not, to find a little time and space to sing, be it in the car, in your yard, in the shower. And the Carpenters wrote a song about it that I just would like to read to you all. Sing a song, sing out loud, sing out strong. Sing of good things, not bad. Sing of happy, not sad. Sing a song. Make it simple to last your whole life long. Don't worry that it's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song. Sing a song. Let the world sing along. Sing of love there could be. Sing for you and for me. Sing a song. Make it simple to last your whole life long. Don't worry that it's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song.
Thanks, Ruby. I was singing it in my head as you were
Mm-hmm.
reading it. That's an oldie but a goodie, but true. So that wraps things up for today. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode, and from all of us here at Camp Code, remember to take care of you. And thanks for the listening, friends.